Welcome everybody, good afternoon. Today we are going to have a wonderful and informative session for our Aspire Alliance with Texas Research Collaborative. Our webinar today is Inclusive Teaching Goals, Equity and Diversity in the Classroom. And to address this topic, we have today our guest speaker and webinar facilitator, Dr. Lucy Michal. And to sum it up in one sentence, she defines her career basically from going from faculty to researcher. As you can see, Dr. Michal currently serves as a research project assistant to the Vice President of Instruction and Workforce Education, and she has been doing that since 2016 as she is a retired professor of mathematics also from EPCC. So maybe somebody even took a class with Dr. Michal. She holds a PhD in teaching, learning, and culture from UTEP, an MS in math from Michigan State University, and her bachelor's also in math from UTEP. As you can see, her many credentials, honors, and participations, as well as her previous service and duties, include being the director of the K-16 Math and Science Alignment at the El Paso Collaborative. Wow, that's a lot. Director of other initiatives, co-director, special assistant, PI, co-PI, coordinator, and of course, numerous publications, not only on her subject, which is mathematics, but also in education. She has ample experience on the subjects of teachers' education, and currently, and that is why she is our special guest speaker today, she's leading an effort at EPCC that is aimed for equity through faculty development. And Dr. Michal will talk more to you about how this is being implemented at EPCC and how she's leading that effort. This is our quick webinar outline and what we're going to talk about today. And I will leave the floor then to Dr. Lucy Michal. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah, and also Dr. Flores. Thank you so much for inviting me. I congratulate all the fellows that are working towards this really wonderful project of Aspire, and especially since it really is addressing a large need of faculty at community colleges. So we are going to take a little bit of an introduction into equity and equality, and maybe look at some concepts about diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality, and then look at a large picture of what, why should we look at equitable learning classrooms as seen in a large picture form, but then as an example, how our working group of faculty members at the college, what they're doing now to promote this idea of looking at how to make their classrooms more equitable learning experiences, and then an example of an intervention that we have faculty do, and that's it. So hopefully it'll be an interesting afternoon, and we'll create a lot of a discussion. So first we'll look at equity and equality, and some concepts around all of that. And so in Change magazine in 2018, Estela Ben-Simon really talked about, and she quoted Anderson saying back in 2012 that finally equity had entered the dominant discourse of higher education. Of course, we had been talking about equity for a while, but in higher ed, it was not really the dominant discourse, and it really started to begin to do that about 15 years ago. And so what is equity, and how is it different from equality, and why? Why is it important for us to look at and distinguish the two, or why not? So these are questions that our faculty began to look at, and I can tell you a little bit about what we do in later slides. So equity versus equality. And so when you look at equality, it really imagines an equal world. Everyone comes in into the door, especially at the community college level. We give them all equal access, all equal opportunity. However, if we can, the world is not equal. So when equity enters the discourse in education, we really know that because in some areas, in many schools, and in schools, for example, in our border region, some students enter from schools that are not as equally funded, or they may lack some resources in their funding. And so the experiences of students in schools, but also at home, whether or not they had tutors or whether they're coming in with a lot of aid from family, all of these matter. And so we need to look at that idea that it really is important for us to look at the individual needs that students might need. And so some concepts and definitions, when you look at diversity, really it's kind of saying, are we serving the students that really look like our community? And are the teachers, the faculty, the administrators reflective of those communities? Inclusion, of course, looks at affirmative practices and mindsets that really enable participation across all identities. Equality, I'm going to go to that, is really looking at treating everyone the same without regard to any differences when developing or implementing policies, procedures, practice. That equity is the one thing that kind of looks at the policies and the practices and procedures and the mindset that will ensure that every student that walks in our colleges and universities will have the various supports that they need to succeed. And while all of these are very important in their own right, it's equity that the community college really focused on about 10 years ago. Next. So to give you a picture of equitable learning classrooms, we're going to look at dimensions of equity, not just equity itself, but some dimensions that have been adapted from a work by Rochelle Gutierrez. What knowledge is needed for teaching so that teaching is in a classroom where students have equitable learning experiences. And a specific example on how we're talking about that now, the faculty working group, which I call the scholars of teaching. So Rochelle Gutierrez is a faculty member in Chicago, I think the University of Chicago in Urbana. And she creates and she has faculty courses that really prepare students that teach mathematics, mainly in high school. And so she wrote a wonderful article called The Gap Gazing Fetish on achievement gaps. And she said, you know, why should we focus on achievement gaps? That's such a very negative way to look at things. And instead, let's look at equity. Let's define equity and how the dimensions of equity might really take a look at some achievement levels and how we can raise them in all students. And so she talks about access, about achievement, identity, and power. And all of these really are things that, especially in the last 2.5 years for us, have really changed the course of what happens in our classrooms. We really began to take a look at what happened when the technology divide really was highlighted, and we knew that our students and some faculty and even staff did not have access to what they needed in terms of technology. So resources availability is a huge part of equity. And then achievement, and she talks a lot about, we look at when students come into the classroom and when they leave, they have a grade. They complete or they may not complete. And so what about in between? We know so much about how participation and engagement that students have in classrooms really has positive impact on a student's success and what they do as they progress, not just through the course that we're teaching, but also through their programs. And then in identity, she really maintains that when you take a look at identity, actually looking at cultural and linguistic connections that are very familiar and family connections, That's an important piece of us taking a look at when we're talking about our students in our classroom. You know, do they feel they belong, for example? A sense of belonging has really been identified through research that really impacts student success. And then power. I think this is my favorite one because it kind of takes a look at all of the things. And it says, are we creating and giving students the agency they need to be able to believe that they can affect change, not just in themselves, but also in the college community and in society? And so knowledge needed for teaching. If we come in and think that, and as I did, 40 or 50 years ago when I started teaching, that all I needed to know was content in mathematics, I really had a big eye-opening experience when I thought, I need to know more than mathematics. And so it was Boyer in 1990 that really talked a lot about that good teaching means that faculty, as scholars, are also learners. And every time that we have conversations with our students, what they tell us, what they ask us, the comments, the discussion and questions that they give us really push us in creative and new directions. And that's wonderful because it helps us grow. And so starting with that, our faculty working group, next slide, is really engaged in enhancing the understanding of equity, in sharing practices and strategies of their own, what they're using in classrooms. They also talk, we talk a lot about the knowledge they need for teaching. It's not just mathematics that I needed. I needed really to be a very good communicator, a very good writer. I needed to know when to test, how often, and how to just test without just using a pencil and paper to test. And so there's a lot of knowledge that we need for teaching. We talk about that in our working group. We also talk, and this is the example that I'm going to give you, about some interventions that will maximize whatever it is that we're doing in our classroom, because we have faculty that are very expert faculty in terms of their content and what they're doing, but how else could they maximize the impact of the learning experiences that their students have? So those are the activities. The expectations are that faculty meet 4 times per semester, about every 3 or 4 weeks. They read and discuss articles that have been, they're in juried journals, in their studies. They're very, very, very dense articles in terms of research. And I know Edith is in the audience. She might attest to this. They also reflect on the articles, post a reflection, and then at the end, they work with a group to present a professional development session about what they learned while they were in the working group. Next. So knowledge needed for teaching is one of the big things that we talk about. And it was in Schulman's article in 1986 where he talked a lot, and this is specifically, he was talking about K-12, but a lot of these things are really the knowledge base for teaching, whether you're teaching in elementary, middle, high school, or at the college. We all need these things. So his article talked about scholarship in content disciplines. Was really, that's the only criteria that I had to, on paper, show the college or anywhere where I was going to apply that I had the knowledge of knowing mathematics. So the scholarship in my content is a very necessary way to be able to teach. I also had to know a lot about the educational materials, the curriculum that we were using, the structures that are very different at a community college, not just for faculty, but the structures that impact students. There's nobody telling a student, next week we're going to have this, or, now go to this other class, don't be late. They're really very different structures that we're using. And then formal educational scholarship. And Schulman talks about this as scholarship that we need, that really is formed when we finish our degrees, when we finish our programs in our either college or university. But how do we connect that to what we're doing now. And are we reading? Are we reading our articles? Are we looking at what our professional organizations are doing? That's part of the formal educational scholarship that we need for teaching. And then the wisdom of practice is really something that we gain as we go through semester by semester. Are we taking a look at what we've learned from last semester to how we're going to change this semester? Is our syllabus what the college thought our syllabus should look like? And is it working for our students? So the wisdom of practice is a large part of the knowledge base that we need for teaching. But as community college faculty, no one had a conversation with me about equity or about diversity or inclusion or opportunity. Some of those things were inside of me, but I never had formal discussions or dialect or even across the hall discussions about what else did I need to know about the students that I was teaching. And at the time I was teaching, actually, a lot of my students were veterans. When we started at the college, I was at the Logan Heights facility, which was the old Army barracks for Fort Bliss. So I'm telling you how old I am now, but there's so much more knowledge that is needed for teaching, and something that I know that you all have been talking about in the webinars that you've had. Sarah shared the agenda that I've had. So let's stop there for a little bit and take a little break. Next.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Yes, we're going to go into our breakout session, and that's precisely the effort that we're trying to do. So I know that all of you, everybody, all of our participants this semester, we already have you thinking about these concepts. And I laugh when Dr. Michael says that she's old because of these things not being in vogue or in the conversation. I started college 20 years ago, and this was not part of the conversation. I still had paper schedules to pick my classes. So we are all old. So this is a not precisely a new thing. I would say, literature from the 90s as some of the references that we have in earlier 2000s, but it is something that now you as upcoming educators and teachers for teaching are also learning all of the vocabulary, the concepts, and more importantly, how to apply all of this in your own teaching practicum. So as the previous slide was linking to the breakout session, got you thinking, what knowledge do faculty need to teach in a community college? And let's make a quick memory moment also to bring in what you've experienced in our past webinars and those topics. We went through the mission and vision of community colleges, right? And how this is an American invention and how this was aimed for workforce and how it has transformed itself into a different approach in higher education. We also talked about creating effective teaching statements. We talked about certain other topics that at this point have enabled you to acquire enough information to understand better the climate of a community college as a workplace and as the house of knowledge, right? So then let's jump to our breakout session, and remembering everything that you've learned so far with your practicum, let's think and talk about what knowledge do faculty need to teach in a community college. So as usual, we appreciate that for the breakout session, everybody opens their microphone and their camera. And I'm not even going to try 10 minutes because we always end up doing 15. So I will see you back in 15 minutes starting now. Thank you so much. If your call drops, remember, join back in and I will resend you to the breakout rooms. Have fun, everybody. Okay, everybody, we're coming back. Thank you. Was 15 minutes enough or no? Next session, you're going to be asking me for 20.
I think with the size of the breakout groups that I had, 15 minutes was pretty good. We didn't cover everything, but I think we did cover the most important topics. Maybe our grad students, our fellows will tell us differently, but
Yeah,
That's when we want them to open their microphone.
that's great. We had, depending on the topic, of course, but we are trying to do the breakout rooms according to the topic, seeing if we need a more specific one-on-one interaction. So thank you everybody as usual for opening your cameras and your microphones and participating in the portion of the presentation that allows you to have a more personal interaction and also get in obviously a couple of questions and comments from our leadership team. And if you were lucky enough to have Dr. Michal in your session, well, I'm hoping that you got some juice out of that. So thanks again. And let's continue after our what knowledge do faculty need to teach at a community college. Let's give the floor again to Dr. Michal, and she will continue the conversation based on interventions, which are two different approaches to interventions, and how these small tweaks and changes in your classroom will allow you to better facilitate the intention and obviously the outcome of equity and equality within your classroom. Dr. Michal.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to give an example of a research-based intervention that we use that has been shown in at a variety of studies where they actually help with first-generation college students and also underrepresented minorities that are first generation. And so the research-based interventions, how might we create equitable learning and student success environment? How could we do that? So one way is that we talk about in the faculty working group after reading a lengthy article is to use interventions that are research-based. There's more about something that's being research-based than the something that says, well, I have a gut feeling this works, but a research-based study is really a good way to start. Also, these interventions target students' thoughts, feelings, and beliefs in and about college. They also increase students' sense of belonging in college, which is an important factor in student success. And they work best if students are not aware that they're participating in an intervention. So these interventions, and I'm specifically going to talk about the TaskValue intervention, really does work if the student does not know that you're actually performing an intervention. Next. And so the TaskValue interventions really make students do a variety of things, but these are the three things that are really highlighted in the article. The students get to think about the value that the content gives them through writing. So you'll ask students to write about the content, something that they just learned. They focus what you just learned, what the student just learned, and they emphasize academic content. So when we do this, note that it's going to be something that you're going to have students write about, not tell you about, but write about. So it's going to connect, it's going to have some connection that where the student has to think about it and then write about it. But it's also going to help them communicate the value and importance of content by giving you examples of how that is relevant to them or how it's useful to them. And so how that connects to their personal goals is important. So you're not telling them, you're learning this because it's going to help you do this or blah, blah, blah. Sometimes that's helpful. But research has shown that if the student tells you, if you make the student connect why that's valuable for them, it's a much better indicator of whether or not a student's going to be more successful. And specifically, the utility value interventions are the ones that I'm going to talk about from this study. Next. So to implement this intervention, it's called a utility value because it has a student think about what use it has while they're using this and learning this content. So to implement, the faculty are asked to have students write a paragraph that explains what value they, the students, get in learning a particular concept, a topic, a theory, an issue that you're talking about. So you're going to ask the students to write a paragraph. Some faculty have students write an essay, but you can write a paragraph is all that's needed. And the students should write about the value they gain from learning the content as it relates to their personal goals or the values their community gains. So faculty have said that the students wrote about how it's helping them get their engineering degree if they learn this math, or it's helping them go back and when they're at home, take a look at how to resolve some conflict if they're talking about that in their classes. And so it's this type of intervention that really serves students best. And it's a type of intervention that statistically showed significant gains in course completion in a course of students in a biology class. So the intervention was given over a course of 2 years in a large biology freshman class. The two control groups, they had one student write about this TaskValue intervention with this prompt. And I'm paraphrasing the prompt a little bit. The other students were given, the control group was given the task of summarizing the content. And so it showed that there was significant difference, especially in the first generation students that were from underrepresented minorities. They have the article itself has a lot of different interventions, but this specific one, I chose this one because this is a STEM group. I'm actually, the faculty that I work with is from all disciplines, but this is from a study that showed this in a population of students that really does mirror a lot of the population that we have at the community college. Next. So the one thing that you have to really realize, and that is very, very important to note, is that while these interventions have been shown to really help students, and an intervention, remember, is different from a strategy in that an intervention has been designed for a particular group of students, and it's monitored. So the faculty that are doing this at the college are looking at what their students were doing before they started the interventions and how their students are doing now. They're also comparing their progress and the students that they have tried the interventions with, how that's worked with maybe in comparison to with other faculty. Of course, not really knowing who the faculty are, but how their students are doing in terms of success or not success with other students. But I tell the faculty that even though these are very carefully designed and they work and they do catalyze the effects of what you're already doing in your classroom, because our faculty are using wonderful educational reforms, they're using good curricula, they're using wonderful text, the technology is wonderful. Even though these are wonderful things, we're not asking that they replace them with an intervention. We're asking that alongside of doing whatever it is that they're doing in the classroom, if they spend a few minutes of the course time during the semester to have students write about the value that they have in what they are learning, it can show significant gains. And this is one way that we are looking at taking and making a classroom that we know is already working, a classroom we've designed with faculty that know their content and a few other things, but how they might add on to giving the classroom experience for students just a little bit more, giving students a little bit more edge. Because in the population of students that we have the same population that the subpopulation of students in the study had that almost mirror the population of students that we have. So in the study itself, they looked at a variety of different things that could possibly measure. They looked at gender, they looked at equity, they looked at gender, they look at socioeconomic levels. They also looked at whether they were white or from underrepresented minority students. They looked at a variety of things. Were they first generation? Were they not? How long did they write? And the one thing that stood out from using the utility value intervention is that the number of students that did better in the control, in the groups where they were writing about what they were learning and how that was connected to their own values, those students did far better than the other control group that were just writing a summary of what they learned. And so I tell the faculty, be careful when you actually present your materials. Don't say that because you made the intervention, this is what helped. You know, it is something that is going to help catalyze what you're already doing without disrupting what you're doing. You're just adding a little bit more writing, but it's going to have far-reaching experiences for your students. And I believe that's probably it. My resources include the places where that have Estela Ben-Simon's article in Change. And Estela Ben-Simon, by the way, used to be the director of CUE, the Center for Urban Research at the University of Southern California. I also have the Boyer and the Gutierrez articles there. Gutierrez has been a wonderful resource for mathematics, but there are similar kinds of resources and are authors for the other STEM fields. And then the Harakowitz articles are the articles where the faculty could read, and it was my way of having them think about what they could do as readers of research articles to help them in their classroom and to help their classrooms become more equitable learning places. And the stuff on equity is from Diane Troyer, our Achieving the Dream coach, who has really come in to tell us that when colleges work on equity, things change, because you do have a lot of changes that occur if you're centered and you're focused with whatever you're talking about, if you're focusing that around equity. And that is my presentation. Thank you so much. I don't know if I have people have questions or what else might occur after this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michal. And as you know, everybody, we will make this presentation available in your resource section in Blackboard. I love to see when people are taking notes. So I see a few of you writing stuff down, but remember that if you're interested in accessing these resources or further your own research, you can have a copy of this in a few minutes right after we adjourn. So I want to thank Dr. Michal, and also a quick mention. We also want to give a special thank you to Professor Aguirre from EPCC, who has a couple of times joined us. She is one of our mentors for the semester, and I am sure that having a mentor in the breakout sessions also sparks great conversation and gives you a different perspective on the topic that we have at hand. So saying that, thank you, Professor Aguirre. Thank you so much, Dr. Michal, for that insightful presentation. And Dr. Flores, the floor is all yours. I leave you also here the contact information for Dr. Michal if you want to drop a line, and also keep on the conversation if you have any other things that you want to specifically address or resources that you want to ask her. And I'm not intending to give you extra work, Dr. Michal, but
No,
here is your contact information for people who want to explore some of these ideas, or you want to have an open line with Dr. Michal. And Dr. Flores, all yours.
Thank you, Sara. Well, once again, Dr. Michal, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for participating in this webinar and giving our students an opportunity to realize the importance of equity in higher education. I was having a conversation with 3 of our fellows, and one of the topics that we touched on was the importance of realizing that not all of our students start at the same level. And that important recognition is fundamental, not only because it's going to open the door for the students to realize that they have resources available to them on their campus, but because it's creating an environment in the classroom that you are, as educators, developing. And that environment is one of inclusiveness. So equity, inclusiveness, and other topics are linked, and we will continue having our conversations about the importance that they play now in higher education in the 21st century. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that all of you, by thinking about equity, by thinking about inclusiveness, by creating safe space where the students can share their background with you, will only make it a much better environment for the students to learn and to be appreciated and be validated for what they do. So once again, thank you all for participating in this webinar. We will continue our conversation next time. Perhaps I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if there's any last comments, perhaps from Professor Villalobos, if you want to add anything, that
Yes, you took the words out of my mouth, Dr. Flores.
Okay.
I was gonna thank Agni for facilitating, and also Dean Villalobos, because aside from you, they were the other breakout room leaders. So thank you
Right.
always for being part of the workings of what we do. So Dean Villalobos, is there anything you would like to address before we adjourn?
No, I think Dr. Michaels did an absolutely fantastic job. And I think that speaks to the heart of what community colleges can do for our students, as well as, the strength that we have in our faculty members like Ms. Aguirre and Dr. Vasquez, who are the mentors. So I'm happy to see Dr. Michaels give this wonderful presentation. And I look forward to seeing all of our Aspire cohort be future EPCC or community college instructors somewhere.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. And just addressing, Dr. Flores, you mentioned the term safe spaces, and I just want to put something in everybody's mind. Remember that if you didn't know this, but the concept of a university is some sort of, I guess, medieval, right? Because one of the oldest universities is from 1100, or the concept of university, which is rounding up the general knowledge of the universe. So you go to get a little bit of everything in the universe to become a better rounded individual. And that idea in itself was the creation of a safe space to share knowledge. So let's not forget that, because that is actually the origin of institutionalizing knowledge, a place where we can share safely differences of opinion and reach a higher echelon of human knowledge and growth. So with that being said, thank you so much for your time, and I will upload the recording as soon as we finish in a copy of the presentation. You have our information on the screen. Thank you so much for uploading your deliverables and for keeping in track and for staying on schedule. So have a great weekend and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to see your faces. Bye-bye.
Adios.
Adios.
Bye.